Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, and I am the interim minister here at May Memorial Unitarian Universalist Society. I welcome you to our congregation this afternoon on the sad occasion of remembering the life of Doris Sage. Doris was a long-time beloved member of this congregation, very active, and we will hear the voices of family and friends, those who knew her, and remember and to sing songs that she loved and that live the spirit of her life, which was not one of sorrow, but one of vibrant, committed, responsible activism. And so we will remember her life this afternoon. A little bit of business beforehand. First, please remember to turn your electronic devices to worship mode if you have not done so already. Also, if you do need to use the restroom, they are down the left hall as you go out. And after the service today, there will be a reception in our social hall, which is down the right hall as you go out. Please note at the end of the service, I will ask you to stay seated until the family has recessed out, and there will be a receiving line in the social hall so that you may greet the family and offer your condolences and remembrances there. At this time, I would like to invite Daniel, Catherine, and Alina Sage to come forward and light our chalice. And I would like the community to join in the chalice lighting words that are printed in your order of service. We light this chalice in celebration of the gift of life. May its light be a beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning. Infinite love, be here with us now. Doris was a child of the Civil Rights Movement, one who raised children during the Civil Rights Movement. And so we begin with our opening hymn, number 169, We Shall Overcome. I invite you to rise as your spirits and bodies allow. Please be seated. At this time, I invite Michael Sage to come forward and share a reading.
Wednesday, May 31st, 2017, 5:30 p.m., LA, CA. Lovely gray day, rare. As I listen to NPR, Mom, oh Mom, it was me and you for 5 years. My first words, patterns and materials. All my early memories of Supermom Doris, ceramics, home ec, making every amazing candy. She was so cool and energetic, a drive I have to this day. Dad and her just learned and changed and never stopped. She outlived all her family. I was the first son and the first grandson. She gave me the best upbringing I could ever ask for. She was the shit. Mom made her own clothes, style, design, fashion, buying our furniture in Chicago for Betland Court as we moved to Hayward. She loved me unconditionally and feared the freedom she gave me. Goodbye, Mom. Thanks for the best ever.
She feared the freedom she gave me. That is powerful. Yes? So we gather to remember this amazing life, to celebrate the life of Doris Sage. Doris lived a life committed to care and responsibility in word and in deed. And as soon as the word that Doris had died started to make it into the world, I received messages from ministers and activists throughout our Unitarian Universalist community. People who knew her, who her life had touched, people who felt rejuvenated in their justice work by her presence, her listening, and her constant encouragement to do. Those who knew Doris loved her and Dan for all that they had done and all that they had given. Dan Sage, who died just a few years ago, married Doris when they were quite young. They were 17, she was 17, and he was 19 years old. She just out of high school, he just out of the military. And they shared their lives from that time on in every way. 66 years of constant and shared life. Dan acquired his degree in special education administration and soon received a position here at Syracuse University. And Doris went on to study special education and teach in some of the most difficult schools who receive the least resources that Syracuse has to offer. They both traveled, particularly in Central America. They both crossed the line at the School of the Americas, and they were both arrested, and they served their time at the same time, though in different places. And of course, they raised children together, and they loved grandchildren together. That said, let's be clear, Doris was her own woman. And she had strongly held convictions. I only had the pleasure of meeting her twice, and both times it was clear she knew what she thought. And she believed in doing what you promised and in living a commitment in life. As some of you may know, there are scheduled protests today throughout the country in about 2 dozen cities, including Syracuse. Protests against Islam in this time of Holy Ramadan. Reverend Joe Cleveland, who is an intern minister here at May Memorial, wrote to me and said, "You can be sure that Doris will be in the counter-protest in spirit." She would not brook unkind treatment of her neighbors. One of my only conversations with Doris was around the election, not long after it, and she couldn't do much, but she said, "I am committed to doing all I can do. I will be on the phones. I will write letters." When I think of that conversation with her, I think of the words of Thomas Merton. He wrote, "We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race, Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party or race or nation, but a deep elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been, a revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid. Doris did not avoid. She may not have chosen the struggles of our time, but she rose up to them. Doris lived through some of the greatest challenges in modern history. She grew up during the Great Depression, and she learned how to live with little, to be frugal, and to make the things that she needed. As was mentioned, she knew how to make and design her own clothes, thanks to surviving that time. She was a teacher during the Civil Rights Movement, and while working here in Syracuse schools that were segregated by neighborhood and by class, and are still segregated today. During the 1980s, when Central and South America were experiencing constant interference from the United States government, something again that continues today, Dan and Doris traveled to El Salvador and Colombia. Eventually, they would adopt a sister town that Doris would visit many times right up into her 70s. When this congregation became a sanctuary church and housed a few immigrants fleeing persecution, she was actively involved in supporting them. And upon just her second visit to the School of Americas, she put her body on the line, even over the line, to try and raise awareness of the practices and the criminals being educated in that school. Doris was a woman of conviction, and she put her action where her mouth was. She walked her talk. Now, Doris was not your standard 1960s stay-at-home mom, as I'm led to believe. She went to school and she worked. She taught her children to respect women, to be responsible, and to do good in the world. Her children had the freedom to grow and were given choices in their homes, in our church school, and often independence above and beyond what some of their peers were given. But she encouraged responsibility, and she taught them to be good neighbors, to be good stewards. And she left a legacy with her children to do good in the world, to be humble, and to love those around them. I could say more about Doris, but we will hear many stories about her life and work throughout our service today. I do want to say that to remember her is to hold grief, to hold loss of a wonderful, powerful woman. May we remember that grief is a form of love. Love for Doris, love for her actions, love for her gifts, and yes, love even for her imperfections. This love may come in the form of anger or pain, sadness or numbness. This grief, this love is a testament to Doris' life and gifts. It is a testament to her love for Dan, for her children, for her family, for her friends, for all activists she came to meet. It is a testament to her active participation in this congregation for decades. It is a testament to her justice commitments throughout the world. I keep calling him Reverend. It's just Dr. Cornell West. He should be a Reverend. Dr. Cornell West writes, "Justice is what love looks like in public." Doris lived that love out loud. She lived her love in that justice. So may we carry that love forward in all that we do, knowing that her light carries on. Unitarian Universalists do not focus on what comes next. We focus on this life and the good works that we do in the here and the now. We cannot know what comes next, but we can know that Doris lives on in us, each person sitting here today, and all those that she touched throughout her life. May we carry her love and spirit in our minds and hearts, and especially our actions. Let us close today with these words from Rabindranath Tagore. "Peace, O hearts, let the time of parting be sweet. Let it not be a death, but completeness. Let love melt into memory and pain into song. Let the flight through the sky end in the folding of hands over the nest. Let the last touch of your hands be gentle, like the flower of the night. Stand still, O end, for a moment, and say your last words in silence. I invite you now into a time of meditation, prayer, contemplation, according to your own personal spiritual practice. And I invite you to be present here now in this room, aware of your love, your grief, and your memory of Doris and her life. And I invite you to consider for a moment, what in her life will live on in you? How will you carry forth her good work in the world, in your life, that she may live on? O still small voice within and great mystery beyond our experience and our knowledge. May we hold Doris in our hearts, living her energy into the world, knowing that as she lives in us, she is no longer lost, but given. And in this day, we offer blessings to those in times of sadness and pain, anger, numbness, and grief, remembering that that is a testament to our love, even in its pain. May we know we are not alone as we remember this life and we experience this loss. And may we know that as this life ends, so a new chapter begins. Thus is the cycle of life. For earth we must come, and to earth we must return, each in our own time. For all who need our blessings, may they have it. For all gratitude we hold in our hearts, may we lift it up. And for this most amazing life, may we say thank you, and may we say yes. And so may we say, blessed be, and amen. I invite you to rise as your spirits and bodies allow and join in hymn number 123 in the gray hymnal, Spirit of Life. At this time, I invite Daniel Sage to come up and offer a remembrance.
my memories of Grandma begin with stories. When my sisters, Kate and Allie, and I were kids, and Grandma and Grandpa would come to visit, she would tell us stories right before bed. Anansi's Stella Luna staghorn fossil soup, our own version of stone soup. I remember my favorite, the name of the tree. On Christmases, the stories were even more special. Grandma and Grandpa gave us little booklets with stories she had written herself. These stories centered around us, me, Kate, and Allie, and the experiences we had together as a family. For instance, every summer we would spend at least a couple weeks at Grandma and Grandpa's lake house on Skaneateles Lake. Sometimes Mom and Dad would leave us there with them, and it would just be Grandma, Grandpa, and the kids. I can't even recount how many times after a full morning of swimming, we would come up to the house, and Grandma would make us sandwiches, and of course, our favorite, chicken noodle soup. There are a lot of memories at Skaneateles Lake, and a lot of stories. Many games of canasta, Chinese checkers, dominoes. Many nights spent with a pot of tea and a bowl of ice cream. Many days spent swimming, and many chicken noodle soups. Another one of those booklets tells about the time Grandma and Grandpa went to jail. I remember as a kid having a conversation with Grandma about why they did. And my comment at the time was, "Grandma, tell the whole world." And that comment became the title of one of her social justice pieces. I didn't fully realize until I was older really how fearless she was, and what a unique grandma I and my sisters have. I think Uncle Mike put it very well. The very first booklet the grandma wrote was when I was 3. The title of that booklet is Daniel Moy. And in that booklet, Grandma had written a note. Stories from grandparents are sacred in the sense that they represent their unconditional love. And it is that unconditional love that I will remember most. Thank you.
This time I invite Catherine Sage.
I became a motherless daughter 2 years after Doug and I got married. As devastated as I was at the time of losing my own mother, I took comfort knowing I had a wonderful mother-in-law whom I loved just as dearly. She was gentle and kind. I never heard her raise her voice in anger. I remember asking her, "Do you ever get mad or angry?" To which she quietly replied, "Yes, but I never saw it." She was always gracious and polite. She spoke softly as she whispered poetry. When she held Daniel for the first time after he was born, she lovingly looked at him and said in a sweet-sung lullaby, "I am your grandmother." She was with us when Kate was born amid the blizzard of 1993. Again, she held Kate in her arms and said, "I am your grandmother." Now, when Kate was a toddler, she was afraid of Grandma, and Grandma thought it was because of her white hair. And when Allie was born, Grandma held Allie too, and once again she whispered, "I am your grandmother." And she thought Allie was a pistol. Independent, feisty, she holds her own. Grandma, that's what we called her, and that's how she wanted to be called. There was no other role she relished more than being called Grandma, and that was her identity. And even Doug called her Grandma when he took her to appointments, which only confused the doctors. Is Doug the son or the grandson? My sister Norm and I did not have grandparents growing up, and she too was so thrilled to have the opportunity to affectionately call someone Grandma. She was Grandma to all of us and to those who had young children. She read us stories. She told stories. She wrote stories for Daniel, Kate, and Allie. When she visited us in Maryland, she would sometimes visit each of the children's classroom, and my classroom too, navigating the confusing campus to share her stories. She wrote stories to give as Christmas gifts. She told bedtime stories at camp. Koala Lou, Noe Jose, the wide-mouthed frog. Now these are our treasured memories. Now Doug remembers Grandma as being a very cool mom. She allowed him to walk to school by himself, be a latchkey kid, and be responsible. She defied the suburban norms at the time. She was not a stay-at-home mom. She went back to school. She went to work. She was a wife. Dan and Doris, Grandma and Grandpa. They were a couple. They were partners, 66 years. They were strong, modern, progressive, and principled. They entertained friends, water skied, traveled, and fought for social justice. The last few years, as Grandpa faltered and then passed on, she found independence. Friends who loved her urged her to move where she could have more help. No, her home was the way she liked it. That's where she'd stay. When she fell off the stool reaching for the microwave, the answer was a lower microwave she could reach. She appreciated the extended time Doug spent in Syracuse, but she was also glad to see him go home. Women came to help her with the things she wasn't strong enough to do, but they were also her friends. Just last month, Danielle invited her to her birthday celebration at the Nation. She was invited to the Longhouse. She got to sit where the elders sat. She was Grandma. We will remember her because she nurtures us with all her generosity, time, and love. Thank you.
And now our remembrance from Frances McMillan Parks.
If you've ever seen the King quilt hung for a Martin Luther King Jr. celebration in a January month, you should know that Doris Sage sat next to Dwayne Hardy, who sat next to me around an old quilting frame. And we put thimbles on our fingers, and we threaded sharp needles, and we sewed and sewed and sewed until we had created a quilt which we titled The Beloved Community. We drew the title for the quilt from a request that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had made during his lifetime calling us all to serve in community. And so if in your archives you find an old pamphlet and look at the back of the pamphlet, you will see that the name Doris Sage and Dan Sage, whom we persuaded to put a thimble on his finger and to thread sharp needles and to sew, creating the imagery of Martin Luther King Jr., who had struggled for a lifetime to achieve social justice, as had Doris Sage, our dear friend. There is a collection of portraits, probably housed in the basement of Hendricks Chapel in a safe place, I hope, and a dry place, I hope. And this portrait has 5 remarkable people sitting on a hot bench in downtown Syracuse. We had discovered that a young student at the university, whose name is Seth Heiler, would paint a portrait of 5 people who insisted that we reach towards social justice in this world, and not just in this region, and not just in this city and county, but young Seth Heiler, a visual and performing artist, said, if you find them and have them gather, I will paint their portrait after photographing them on a bench in Syracuse. And so we discovered that across from the county courthouse and in front of Cathedral and around the corner from St. Paul's Episcopal Church and down the road from Plymouth Church and across from what is now the Mission Restaurant, we could find a bench. And so this morning, as the sun was shining and it was getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and there was no longer quite the promise of winter with snow and ice, I thought, this is a kind of afternoon that we found for 5 remarkable people who practiced, who just didn't see justice as a metaphoric statement, but rather who practiced it. And they sat in the hot sun, and young Seth Heiler photographed them, and later he would paint their portrait. I'd like to think that at some point in the next year, we might bring that portrait to May Memorial Unitarian Universalist and have it available for you to see. It's quite remarkable. Doris Sage and I were sister friends. Often our families sat around a table either at our house or at their house. If it were Thanksgiving, sometimes there was a son and a granddaughter who arrived with a turkey in a bag for me to cook. Always at Thanksgiving, the celebration was shared with a bowl of delicious cranberry sauce, because she could make cranberry sauce that rivaled any company or corporation in this world. And I always found that if I moved very quietly to a corner by myself, I could get the first scoopings with a spoon. Our friendship was probably the most remarkable friendship because she, an Oregonian, and I, a Texan, offered the possibility that women and men and their children and grandchildren can cross those boundaries and borders which often separate us over the most artificial criteria. Doris and Dan Sage introduced me to May Memorial, and I have come often, and I am pleased that you are here to celebrate the life of a remarkable woman. We probably collaborated most often and celebrated most often that possibility of storytelling. that possibility that storytelling was not just for the ancients and not just for rocking chair folks, if there are such folks, but for the vigorous and for the intellectual and for those persons who would support conferences and gatherings in Tennessee, as Doris and Dan did for a long time. And when we at the university here conjured up the idea of a storytelling conference, naming it for Sojourner Truth, I thought, whom should we invite? And we didn't have to deliberate very long, because there was Doris Sage, and there was Dan Sage, and there were others who were committed to the possibility that even within an academic setting, there could be a significant gathering of storytellers, one of whom had come from Window Rock, Arizona, and who was given her community's permission to tell at the storytelling conference. Doris Sage, very early in introducing me to May Memorial, wanted me to know that this was a church, this was a gathering, this was a society which had come out of the moment when slavery convinced a lot of folks that that was a rule of thumb, that that was the edict, that that was the way a country should carry on. And she wanted me to know that there were abolitionists within the Society of May Memorial, which absolutely resisted the idea of enslaving other people. And so, as often as I told other stories, she was so kind to listen to me tell the stories of slavery, and sometimes a resolution. She sometimes laughed because she thought that people thought that Texas did not practice slavery, that somehow the territory of Texas escaped slavery. And often we would talk about slavery in Texas and that interesting phenomenon of Galveston, Texas, and that organic moment when the 19th of June was celebrated as a day on which a lot of Texas discovered that people had been freed from slavery. Doris Sage created circles in which we could examine our own perception of social justice. Doris Sage, the teacher of exceptional children. Doris Sage, who lived in pursuit of social justice for people across regions, internationally and nationally and regionally. Doris Sage asked us the question, how is a life to be lived? Except that we would work towards giving voice to all of those persons who are living without voice, who are living disempowered. And so, as we discovered a few weeks ago, there is a photograph of a Dorothy Day on a bookshelf in her home. And it occurs to me that they could have been friends, they could have been neighbors, they could have shared cups of tea together. And perhaps at some point they did. A cup of tea was always offered as one knocked on the door, as one took off one's shoes and hung up one's jacket. But it had to be a ritual of tea drinking. The porcelain pot had to be warmed first. First, the porcelain pot had to be warmed. I discovered much later than I had intended how to turn on the stove, how to get the water boiling so that the porcelain teapot could be prepared for the tea. And then often she would say, I think there are some cookies in the freezer. And if we move towards the freezer, we can take the bag of cookies out and defrost them. And by the end of the visit, sometimes extending over an hour or two or three, all the cookies had been eaten from the plate, and the tea, several cups of tea, had been drunk, and we were visiting as sister friends My sisters in Texas know that Doris has died. And my sisters in Fort Worth, Texas, are the sisters who said years ago, well, if you're on your way to New Mexico for a January visit, then you can come through Texas and you can stop with us. Except that Doris and Dan did not know that in coming to Texas, they would be invited to participate in a ceremony in front of the First Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. And they looked at a parade and they looked at Texans who professed to be Texans. Doris and Dan taught me to love Chautauqua. I had to learn how to spell it and learn how to pronounce it. And in the first year of the new Prius, I was invited to sit on the back seat and to watch them operate this new Prius. What in the world was a Prius, I thought? And I watched them navigate towards Chautauqua that first summer. And when I return to Chautauqua in the summer, and when I go to Chautauqua this year, I will remember that we always stayed at Chautauqua Inn. Sometimes on the first floor, sometimes on the second floor, sometimes on the third floor. The third floor rooms offered you the best porch. The second floor rooms offered you the second best porch. On the first floor, you listened to the garbage collectors come every morning at 7. We went to lectures and we went to gatherings, and at the end of the day, in the amphitheater, we went back to the Chautauqua Inn. We always took a route first through the dairy bar, and we bought ice cream cones. And all wandering back towards the Chautauqua Inn, we ate our ice cream, so by the time we arrived at the inn for the end of day, we had eaten our ice cream and eaten our ice cream cones, and it was all so lovely. I have a grandson, and I have a grandson who, for the years that he has known us, he has called Grandpa Sage, Grandpa Sage. He was given permission. He has called Grandma Sage, Grandma Sage. And I've been trying to think of what I could do to tell Durham, who is now 5 and a half, and who expects Daniel to teach him how to play with all of the Legos in the world. And I would hope that you could be a part of his life always. Our friendship was critical to me. Our friendship and a sense of sisterhood was critical to my daughter, Stephanie Ellen, who incidentally was invited on a Thanksgiving evening when it had become very, very late to drive the Prius. We wanted our dear friend Doris Sage to get home safely. And the route was challenging and the route was dark. And so Stephanie Ellen persuaded Mrs. Sage. There is that Southern necessity for me to tell my children that they must refer to friends as Mr. and Mrs. So Stephanie Ellen drove the Prius all the way out to the house and made sure that Mrs. Sage was back in her house safely. A friend who is your sister also does sisterly things, and so when Susan Laurie had a play up in New York years ago, Doris and Dan Sage said, "We will be there." And I said, "Are you sure?" Susan Laurie's writings are sort of cutting edge. And they wanted me to know that it was just their style, this cutting edge.